Now our first presenter is Daniella Matt. He is a queer Muslim born in Madrid. He was lived many years in the Middle East and in different countries in Europe. He has a career in the areas of education and social work and specialized in gender and Arab Islamic studies. He is widely involved in activism in the field of Islamophobia and sexual and gender diversity within Islam, and is part of the Nasij network in the Spanish state. He is currently doing a PhD on sexual and gender diversity, faith, and dissidence at the Autonomous University of Madrid. Here we go.
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Well, I feel nervous also, but relaxed at the same time, and I will do my best, inshallah. So I will start. I mean, when I received the request to participate in this panel, I was returning from Oslo, where I was attending an event organized by Maruf, another queer association from Norway, on the intersections of Islamophobia and LGBTIQ phobia. And one of the activities was a seminar in which the majority of the participants were queer Muslim refugees, mainly from Syria. And their stories and struggles didn't leave us indifferent. I mean, so later on, some of us, activists who were attending the seminar, were talking about how difficult it is and it was to try to help people to heal themselves, being ourselves wounded healers at the same time. So in my personal case, in my context, which is Spain, I engage with activism in two fields. First is sexual and gender diversity within Islam, and the other one is Islamophobia. Sadly, I have been forced to focus on the field of Islamophobia because of the growing hostility against Islam in Europe, in Western countries. So in every lecture or talk or training that I do, for me it's an overwhelming experience. Not only because I have to deal with this Islamophobia, with this hostility coming from the audience, or because I have to deal with the healing or reconciliation process of my trainees, but because I also suffer this hostility, this Islamophobia, and because, and this is the most important, I'm still going through these healing processes myself. So let's be real. I think that our work is one of the hardest one, but for that reason, I think that we need to think about how can we do it in terms of self-care for activists, how can we manage ourselves in order to stay centered, what spiritual and practical tools can we use to prevent us from burnout. So with this purpose, I will speak from my own experience last year as a participant of the TOT program, training of trainers. Yeah. So I will begin with the TOT program, A Journey from Head to Heart. So when I was elected to the TOT program, I was so happy to participate in a program where I thought in the beginning that I would extend my knowledge about sexual and gender diversity in Islam. Yeah, there were some signs that indicate me that the training was something else, was not only about content on sexual and gender diversity within Islam. The first of them, I met Isjad, one of the participants, at the airport, London airport, and during the 12 hours flight, he was asking like personal questions, one after another, and at the beginning I think, okay, maybe it's because it's a cultural thing, or maybe Isjad is like that, or I don't know. But then I realized that he was kind of preparing me to deal with the training because he had been before in TIC, somehow he knew the TIC dynamics. So once there, Moxen himself explained to us that the training, the training itself was 80% personal, personal or internal processes, and only 20% like content on sexual and gender diversity within Islam. Sorry. Yeah. Can you hold me? Sure. Okay. So from the very beginning, I had several difficulties to connect with my personal emotions. So I think that I decided to focus on this 20% content, hoping to cope with the program, which is a long program. It's almost 4 months. But anyway, the first signs of frustration appeared soon, and I realized that I could not continue varying my the emotional processes of others and silence my own processes. So during iPad, which is the second part of the training, I was kind of more involved in the process, but always keeping like a safety distance between my heart and heart spaces. The week before Earth, a lot of insecurities, conflicts, and fears came to the surface, and as I started to think that maybe something was missing in the process. So back home, it took me also like a long time to analyze what was that missing thing in the process, and at the same time, it took me a lot of time also to accept that I did the best that I could based on the tools that I had back then, which I think is a very good thing to remember. So regarding the idea of trying to balance the head and the heart, from a personal point of view, I think that it is completely necessary to balance both in order to do our work as activists. I mean, the head alone just cannot understand certain experiences. We need to put the heart in order to empathize with other people's experiences. And at the same time, I think that to get out of the wound requires both the head and the heart. At the same time, I think that it is impossible to stay centered if there is no balance within us, inside, I mean. So, yeah, we risk of being carried away by emotions or being indifferent to them if there is no balance within us. So we need to learn to allow ourselves how to be vulnerable, and struggling with that word, and to accept the vulnerability of others, because it's a tool for growth. But at the same time, I mean, this was like a personal point of view, but as I said, at the same time, I'm a part of a global movement. So we also need to understand the importance of this balance between the movement itself. I mean, the movement is a living entity with its own struggles and dynamics. So when the head is in control, we can fall into ego or self-centered leaderships. We were talking about that this during the whole week, that can maybe block the flow of the movement and let us maybe forget what is the real purpose of our job, no? So at the end, I think that the whole movement is made of individuals coming from very different backgrounds and with very different experiences. So I think that we need to recognize our diversity in order to be united as a movement. And I think that the only way to be united is by connecting with ourselves, with our hearts. And only then we can connect with the others through authentic and spiritual relationships. And I think also that without these authentic relationships, the movement will fail. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to add something about this head space. I think is at first, to remain here just in the head is kind of tricky, because allows certain physical benefits. I mean, a false sense of security, which is motivated by the apparent distance to the emotions. But I think little by little, this calm is transformed into a contained energy and a frustration that needs to come out. So if emotions have not yet gone through the heart space, they can now find a way out. So the emotional blockage starts. And the emotional blockage prevents seeing things clearly, I think. So that is the point where spirituality becomes a bridge between both the head and the heart. Yeah, when we fail to find the focus out there, we need to look inside ourselves. I think that we need to turn to Allah and ask for her guidance, because turning back to Allah is turning back to our source, to our balance. So I think the main challenge for us is how to keep in mind this process, how to be constantly aware of the need to connect our head with Allah, which is an open question for the audience. How can we keep in mind this process of connect head, heart with our spirituality? So I would like to share some suggestions that I have found helpful in my own self-care experience as an activist. First of all, I think that we should recognize that our activism is our self-care. I mean, activism is our way of caring for ourselves and for the others. It is through activism that we find support networks, safe spaces where we can share our experiences and work in our healing processes. Secondly, we must acknowledge our feelings. I mean, embrace our moments of weakness or fatigue, and take in the necessary breaks to recover that balance that I was speaking before. And finally, I think it's important also to highlight that there is no right way to do self-care. I mean, we are diverse as our ways to do self-care should be. And personally, in my personal case, I rely on strength from my spiritual practice, always turning to Allah, meditating, praying, asking for help, and being absolutely grateful for the opportunity that Allah has given to me, and try to remember what it means to be a Muslim, acknowledging our responsibility with ourselves, but also with Allah and with His creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniella Matt. Thank you for your sincere thoughts. Do you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Just let me quote from Audre the Lord. She says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." While I was listening, Ahmed, I realized that I'm not that spiritual person. I need to admit this part. But there is an very old tradition about trying to reconcile your head and heart. It is going through from Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam, and nowadays modern spiritual movements are also using that. Just to saying for a few seconds, we can have our moments again, and it is whatever we recite, we want to recite, or whatever we want to think, whatever we want to talk about with ourselves. Just doing these movements it is said that it will help. Hopefully, I'm showing it now. Eyes closed or open, it doesn't matter. Feel free, however you want to do. This in Sufism, it is called reciting of La ilaha illallah, but in the other traditions, it is mantras being used. In Judaism, it is being used for reciting Torah in their daily life. The connection is from head to the down, then to your heart. Trying to recite whatever you are saying, take it from your head to the down, I mean in the surface, in your reality, and take it back to your heart, and go back to your head and surface and your heart. Thank you. Just a few seconds if you want to do. It's not obligatory at all. When I first heard of it in a Sufi madrasa, I was thinking it's so ridiculous. Everyone is looking so ridiculous. How can they do that? Then I was forced, I had to admit, I was forced to do that because it was my third level in that Sufi order, and I was forced to do that. First months, it was so big struggle. I think in the end, I realized I wasn't realizing it is a triangle, or I was thinking, is it, what is it called, Illuminati, because there is a triangle? No, it sounds sometimes a triangle doing that with your eyes included, Illuminati. Then when I did my research, I was surprised. It is not coming even from Islamic perspective. It's very, very ancient context. Now we are moving on our second panelist.
Thank you. Since the presentation today is about self-care, I'm just gonna relax. So Can you guys see me behind the screen? I'm kind of short, so okay. Thank you, Daniel. It was really lovely presentation. Before going on, I would just like to say that he just summed up all my presentation. It's weird. I'm starting to think that TIC looks for archetype when they are looking for TOT participants. So I don't want to bore you with redundancy. I'm just gonna take out a bit from it. Okay. So my story is similar and starts with applying online to the TOT program, and with that came expectations and skeptations from skeptical. I just came up with that word. Now, other than the fear of being led into, to be honest, into a human trafficking cartel, because the website was very sketch. I think you need to update it. I thought, as Daniel, I was coming to an NGO-like training or something like academic courses, and naturally, I had just graduated recently, and that both aligned with my academic interest and activist work. And what I found in TOT, however, like I can assure it, wallah, that was nothing remotely typical. And I think Daniel just lengthily spoke about it, yeah. I will briefly now go over what happened next, and it looks like the following. It started with questioning whether the program was for me or not. And then after that came, in the process, came the indifference to the emotional processes of other participants, but also avoiding my own internal process. In doing so, I was kind of dismissing the heart space, a thing that Mohsen likes to speak about a lot, or emotions, I'd call them, because I thought of them as being irrational or inconsistent. And with that, and then came the discomfort because I did not understand why I wasn't able to grasp non-academic or technical content, and I was just behind everyone in this process. And eventually it led to my disappointment and frustration in my own self, and it kind of led me to realizing that I had my own shortcomings and acknowledging that I needed to actually work on them. And during that journey, Mohsen and other trainers, and I'm really thankful for that, they were really pushing me. And as a result of that, I came to understand that I had created this entity, which I would call my work or my studies or whatever. And it was literally feeding on my own wellness and weakening my relationship with other comrades or other participants. Because I'm trying to conceal my own vulnerabilities to maintain this kind of... and also in my short 3 years of activism on campus, I know for sure that activists start their journey from campuses. They start there, and it's funny and sad that it comes third year of their education, they are completely sapped and completely frustrated and don't want to work again in activism, so they leave it alone because due to the continuous failures on campus and in our country, they perceive that their work has been futile. They don't understand the importance of actually failing and failing again. So how are we addressing burnout? Technically, we are not. But yet, I'm just gonna talk about another experience, which is, okay, yeah, thanks. One of the gateways can be found in this particular space, and it's a feminist co-op called I'm a member of, which I'm a member of. Having the space for the individuals, for the individual member mean finding solidarity and sisterhood. The cooperative started as a project for creating like a space and network for women and non-conforming people, and where they can develop and practice, and I quote our bio here, politics of social, economic, environmental, and gender justice, and that grows larger and stronger to influence the political, cultural, social, and economic structures in which we live. Through our activities, we organize private and very intimate discussions. One of them is the PPP, we call personal, political, and professional. And they are closed chats where members get not to talk only about the theory and how it's applicable in the movement, but also they speak about their own emotions and experiences, and they get to unwind a bit. And find comfort in the assistance of her comrades and strength in their empathetic listening. And I want to link that to the TOT safe space, where we could see the importance of such spaces, both the TIC and the COP, in lending emotional support to the activists. And these kind of practices are not only essential to sustaining our politics and values as activists, but also to engaging in behaviors that honors our well-being, and to maintaining the balance between the work that we do and ourselves, and not compromising important pieces of ourselves for the sake of our work. And here I want to stress this very common problem in assuming that activism has to be a selfless dedication to the other. It doesn't have to. Because I mean, as Daniel said, activism in the end is just another attribute of caring for the self. Another way for self-care and preventing burnout, and I'm not bringing anything original here, so don't murder me, sorry, is validating the pain that come with experiences and allowing the time to heal, and then to take a break to attend to your own needs when you literally feel that you are on the verge of expiring on your deathbed. So it's okay to take a break. And accepting failure is also okay. It's very important to understand that. So some of the cool activities that I would like to recommend include like sleeping, contemplating, and of course partying and sleeping again. Another point is that self-care is not only an individual responsibility, and the organizations need to understand that. Because it's a collective responsibility, and caring for the wellness of the activists should be an organization duty. I strongly believe in that. So integrating the personnel to the work system is actually beneficial to the organization, and not the individual only. And yeah, I think finally I would like to borrow from Imam.
Thank you very much, Safa. I can really connect with Safa in this topic, but through Iranian, I was working with Iranian refugees, LGBTQIA, FSA, which three of the last is fi sabilillah, to Allah. Yeah, I was working with minorities in Iran, and I was realizing this. They didn't have time for self-care, unfortunately, but their self-care was challenging with the government. That was their self-care. That's why I would like to quote from so-called Imam Khomeini something. Imam Khomeini says that Imam Hussein taught us all how to stand up and resist cruelty and the government of tyranny. I think when he said that, I'm absolutely sure he never thought that this quote would be one day used to resist the very government he established based on this idea. And it is being used. It is being used to fight with the oppression of Iran, and it is being used to fight the oppression of any kind of religious movement. And in that case, I am repeating again, unfortunately, we didn't have their self-care, and our self-care was our own activities without stopping activism was that. Now we are moving again. Yeah, we are going through a journey, an adventure actually with Mustafa. Mustafa Hendricks is a Cape Town-based scriptwriter who writes for children's TV shows and animated e-learning videos. This year, him and his partner Lutz developed the Actuation game, a multimedia adventure focused on the rediscovering human values, and he is bringing it to AA this year, inshallah. Let's see.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum to everyone this morning. I love seeing these sort of tired faces in front of me. It's quite beautiful to see that we are, not in that stressed space, but we're giving in to the fact that we are at a retreat, and that's beautiful to see. So I'm gonna, essentially I and TIC will be giving you something. But I'll start by talking a bit about my own experience because, we want to keep it kind of personal. And I'll start by saying that over the past few days, I've noticed something that has come up many times, and that's whenever I give or someone else gives compliments to other people, I find that very rarely do people say thank you and acknowledge that compliment. And I don't know, maybe we think that it's being egotistical to accept a compliment, but something so simple is for me one of the most basic forms of self-care, to acknowledge in a humble manner that thank you, I accept that I did something that you valued. So that's kind of my springboard for self-care. Now, self-care for me, I see as a practice. So, we've spoken about self-care as being activities that we do, but I believe that every practice, if we want to keep it going, must stem from a core value that we maintain. Because if we don't, then the practice just kind of disappears. And for me, that value is self-love. So today I'm going to speak about self-love and what that means to me. So growing up, I was always taught that to be selfish, conceited, and to be interested in myself was a bad thing. And so instinctively, I believed that therefore caring or loving for myself would also be considered a bad thing. And it's easy to mistake that because we see many people who are arrogant or pretending to be confident, but they step on others. And so we think, okay, I must choose the opposite. I must choose to be silent, to be coy, and for instance, to not accept compliments. So, oh, your hair looks beautiful. Oh, yeah, no, someone actually did it for me, as opposed to just accepting it. Or, oh, you did a good speech. Oh, yeah, no, someone actually helped me with that speech. So we kind of don't accept our own agency in our good deeds. And it's easy to understand why, because we see this, people who are too full of themselves, and we don't want to be like that. But I believe that self-love can remedy this because it works in a different way. So when we look at people who are selfish and have these huge inflated egos, I like to refer to that as narcissism as opposed to self-love. Now, where does narcissism come from? Well, I believe that it stems from a fear, from a place of feeling not worthy, not worthy of love in particular. And so, because you feel that no one can really love you or give you what you want because you're not worthy of that, you take as much as you can, whether or not someone is going to get hurt in the process, and whether or not that's actually harmful to you. So we end up doing things in excess. We end up just grabbing, almost in desperation, whatever we can to stay alive and to feel that somehow we are loved. And it often stems from the fear of others' ideas of you. So we feel people judging you, and I've heard this a lot. No, I can see people are judging me. And so the question is, how do you see how people are judging you? And we often project, these feelings. And what we end up doing is we hold on to an established identity. So we find that, okay, I'm a man and, you know, I've been successful in writing, so we use this identity and we constantly try to reinforce this identity. So when someone says to me, oh, you know, that thing you wrote, I wasn't so interested in it, I immediately react because how dare someone challenge my identity? Because that's the only thing that makes me feel worthy. And I think we've all experienced this at some point. So what is self-love? Well, that is actually to embrace the weakness, the vulnerability as they were speaking about, and the flaws that we have, because that is fortunately and unfortunately, a part of who we are and what makes us unique. And it's also about respecting your needs. Sometimes we feel bad. I've noticed this, for instance, in a lot of people that I know who are mothers. They feel bad that they're burning out or that their children irritate them. And we feel bad that we need certain things because we feel like, you know, I'm an adult now, I shouldn't be needing this much. And so respecting our needs is a part of finding that self-love. So I'm a beginner here, and it's been a long road, but there's specific points, moments in my life that I'd like to share that have allowed me to get to a point of practicing self-love, however small it is and however still in a work in progress it may be. So the first came with my spirituality. And at a young age, I grew up obviously in a very patriarchal Islam. So it was always he is the most compassionate, the most merciful, and Allah was always construed as a man. But from a young age, I always imagined Allah to be this woman dressed in black hijab, and she was standing in the Kaaba. And despite people's ideas of, I was even saying he, but in my mind, Allah was obviously a woman. I mean, it didn't make sense any other way. And instead of challenging what people said, I just somehow silently accepted it to myself. And so that developed a certain spiritual core for me. And I accepted that for me, my spirituality was different to what was being told in the mosque. And that already gave me a center. And wherever I've gone since then, I felt comfortable with my own version of Islam. And so that was the first point. I think accepting how we connect on a spiritual level is a part of finding self-love. The next came with my cultural identity and my heritage. And I grew up in a very Muslim community, and I only ever interacted with Muslim people of the same race and with the same experience. And then being thrust into university, suddenly I met all these people who were different, and they had better education, you know, they were of different racial backgrounds, and I felt this deep sense, also they had, you know, better accents to what I had, and I felt a little bit at a lack, almost that I was a bit dumber or stupider than these people because I hadn't had the education that they had had. And there was a lot of questioning going on inside until I just at a point realized that I'm okay with being a public school Cape Muslim colored boy from a now gentrified suburb of Cape Town. And suddenly, with that acceptance, with sharing my heritage, people began to open up. And in a very strange way, people who didn't share my background seemed to find interest in who I was. And this led me eventually to proposing to do my thesis as a screenplay. And I used my own identity, my own heritage, as the basis for the story. And my thesis supervisor was a white middle-class woman who had never interacted with people of color, or much less Muslim people. And it was amazing that when I was passionate about the story, which I so connected with, we could connect on a common value system. And had I stopped myself and said, she's a white woman, she can't understand my experience, I would have never connected with her, and she would have never played and been invited into my own heritage. And so, just exploring my identity in an open way, my cultural heritage, allowed others to suddenly care for this identity, which I may have thought was not interesting to these other people. So I think cultural identity for everyone, where we come from, and somehow accepting and working through that is an extremely important way of actually starting to feel love for ourselves and who we are. Sorry, I'm trying out. And so the next thing really came with my emotions, and emotions are always difficult for us, and I think when I look at activists, I can understand why, because you're fighting against people who are just hating on you all the time. So how do you say that I feel weak? How do you say that I need to be loved and I actually feel hurt? And, you know, I grew up in a family where, you know, my parents were, I suppose they were wonderful. They did everything that needed to be done, but they never hugged me or said that, you know, that they loved me. And I suppose they showed it, but for me, I needed that. I needed it to be said. And I remember one day I was with my father and we were sitting in the car and I didn't know what we were speaking about. But I was just at a point where I think I just needed it to be said. And I said to him, you know, I love you, Papa. And it's just suddenly all of these things, you know, made sense, because finally I wasn't apologizing for this need that I had. You know, I needed to express my emotions, and I had never been given that space. And so I always felt the sense of I was the victim. But at that point I decided I'm going to step up and I'm going to say it. And it wasn't about him saying it back, because I knew that he loved me. But what was more important was that I could say it. I could express my emotion, because that was my emotion. And had I never said that, I think I would never have been able to say to someone that I love you. So that was something I needed to find for myself, to be okay with my emotions and with my vulnerabilities. And the next thing came with my body. And I found that a lot. Being a thin person, people always feel more comfortable with commenting on, you know, your body. So almost every meal that we have here, you know, I'll be dishing food and people will be like, how can you eat so much? And I'll be like, no, my metabolism is fast. And they'll say, oh, you're so lucky. And I guess we're all guilty of it, because thin people never say that they struggle. And that, yes, I actually do eat 5 times a day, but I don't pick up weight. So throughout my life, people have been commented on, you know, me being thin, and I felt self-conscious of that. And I remember that becoming gay was just kind of made it all worse, because suddenly there were all these images of the perfect male form, and I was a big fan of pornography. So, you know, I was always seeing these men who did not look like me, and they were so having this awesome time together. And so I thought, well, I can't be having this awesome sexual relationship, because, you know, I'm a skinny bitch. So, like, I'm never gonna be accepted. And I remember that I would lay in bed sometimes at night and on my back, and I never liked lying on my back because I could always feel my bones. And I would constantly do that, and I would try to eat more, and then, you know, after a few days I would try again. I'd say, okay, what bones do I feel? And before I put on a bathing suit or before I get dressed, I would stare in the mirror and say, okay, do I look thin when I stand this way? How can I make myself not look this thin? And it was always the struggle of this body and it being something that I didn't like and didn't, you know, I really just, I hated it. And I think, I don't know where it began, but I had to realize that I had to accept it, because the process of acceptance, I think, starts with acknowledging, you know, I am thin, I am bony, I have a high metabolism. And when you acknowledge that, you can begin to understand, okay, how does my body work? And only once you acknowledge and understand something can you accept it. And so acceptance is not just saying, okay, it's there, but acceptance is understanding. And so now that I understand the way that I work, that I am just, you know, a high metabolism kind of person, I can actually work towards changing that. And so, you know, I'm on this program now, I'm eating more, I'm starting to work out, but I'm not denying the fact that I'm thin and that I need to eat, you know, 5 times a day in order to just remain the same weight that I am. And so I think for me, the physical, you know, I feel like we all, if we want to change and be different from our physical form, we first need to accept our physical form as it is, because that allows us to understand what we can do to improve that form to the way that we want it to be. And so now I'm gymming, and I still feel self-conscious, and I still look and see all these people doing these awesome workouts, and I think, you know, I'm never going to be that way, but I feel proud that I've taken that steps, and that every day I'm doing, you know, something for my body. So I think accepting and learning to love our bodies is a part of that process of self-love. And then the next thing came also from the body, because I grew up and everyone assumed, I was very intelligent, but I wasn't sporty. And so people kept saying that, and I kept believing that, and so I believed that I was weak. And even today, I still struggle with this idea of me being weak in a physical sense. And I believe that, funny enough, part of self-love is also challenging our boundaries, and I like what the two of them were saying, is they needed to challenge the idea of, that emotions make us weak. And it was a particular day that Lutz, my wonderful fiance who's here, we needed to buy new grass for the garden. And so I went to the farm and I picked up this massive roll of grass. I don't know if you've ever seen these. And it was basically about 100 kilos of grass. And I had the bucky just for this day, and I was alone, and I knew that I had to return this bucky, and there was no one to help me take this thing off. And so I arrived at home with this 100 kilo block roll of grass, and I couldn't push it off the bucky, and I thought, this is impossible. I'm never going to do this because I'm physically weak. I cannot do this. And at some point, something just switched in my mind, and I grabbed the garden scissors, and I just began to cut. And I began cutting this grass in pieces and just kind of tossing them off the bucky and tossing them off the bucky. And for 2 hours, I just worked like a beast. And when I was done, I just stood there sweating, and there was this incredible sense of peace that just washed over me. And I realized I'm not weak. And I could only have ever proved that to myself if I challenged myself. And I looked at this impossible situation. I just said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I think for us, even on a daily basis, when we find those impossible situations, we need to challenge ourselves. Because when we challenge and we push through that impossible, we find that, wow, something that people said about me and that I believed myself was actually wrong. And, that's a part of self-love, to challenge ourselves, is particularly with the things that seem impossible, that we said, of course I can't do that, I'm not that person. And I found out actually I am. So that was awesome. And so the last experience was actually it's been happening in the last year or 2 years with relationships. And I can tell you, being now in a healthy relationship with someone makes it awfully difficult to accept unhealthy relationships with others. So a lot of my friends that I've had in the last few years, I've been kind of struggling to connect with them on a deeper level, on a more emotional level. And I've been trying to make an effort to do more things with them and to kind of just be more there for them and organize more things. And I feel that I hadn't had that reciprocated. And so I started feeling like, okay, well, I must be the one who's not interesting enough, who's not lovable enough, who's not, maybe I'm a bit too crazy or a bit too intellectual, or, I talk a lot, and I realized that. And I kept feeling the sense of that, I'm just not enough as a person, and I'm maybe not interesting enough. And, we were always putting so much effort into, trying to welcome people into our home and setting up this beautiful atmosphere, well, what we felt to be beautiful, and hoping that people would come in. And I suppose secretly we wished that people would do something similar for us. And, well, not a lot of people did. And it left us with a weird sense of almost emptiness and doubt. And then we went on to Europe just a few months ago, and we met up with some of Lutz's old friends, and we went there purely with the expectation of just seeing, Europe. And people just opened up their hearts to us and their homes, and they were doing things for us that we had done for other people. And it was this bizarre sense of like, what the hell did we do to suddenly get all this stuff? And it felt almost like, they'd made a mistake in the, in sort of handing out the good stuff for that 2 months, and we had just been overwhelmed. And I think it was just realizing that maybe this was karma, maybe that's actually a thing, that you actually get back what you put in. And to see it all come flooding back to us, particularly in this, Europe, which to me, I always thought people were not as open and they were not as caring, and I always had this perception that it was super white and very, people were more closed off. And then suddenly there were all these like white people, cisgendered white people who were opening up their hearts to us and were loving us for who we were. And it was like, it wasn't about the color anymore or about the nationality, but it was about these were just beautiful human beings inviting us into their space. And that was an incredibly eye-opening experience. And for me, I always love when things are challenged, and so my notions of the European were definitely challenged, and that has been a beautiful thing. But coming back, I had a really good think, and I sat down and I realized that these other relationships that I'd been holding on to, a lot of it was my expectations that I was putting onto these people. I was expecting them to be the same way that they were to me. And so it wasn't just letting go. Firstly, it was letting go of that I can't expect them to be who I want them to be because I'm projecting onto them. And then secondly, it was saying I need to allow myself to only focus my energy on the relationships that also serve me in the same way that I feel I'm serving those relationships. And so my focus became on I need to focus on healthy relationships. And I decided, I looked through all my friends and I said, I'm going to pick 2 of them and I'm going to put my focus into them because I feel that they are giving back. And the rest, if they want to, they can take a step. And it's been a difficult acceptance because I feel really lonely. And, you know, I have a partner, but sometimes you feel you need someone to turn to. And so there's often these kind of moments where I'm sitting with myself and thinking, oh God, did I make the wrong decision? And how do I say goodbye to these people? Because I've seen their beauty, I've seen their souls at some point. And so, you know, there's this incredible sense of loneliness that comes, you know, rushing back to me. And I think, I just need to call them and just say, you know, okay, let's make this work. But that pain of letting go is important for us, particularly with relationships, because if they don't serve us, we expend all this energy and we just don't get recharged. We have these batteries, and our relationships should recharge those batteries like we recharge the batteries of others. So those have been my processes, and I hope that, you know, we can all consider these things, you know, accepting our spiritual natures, accepting our cultural identities, nurturing our emotions and our emotional needs, learning to love and accept our bodies, challenging what we think are our boundaries, and then finally, only focusing on those relationships that are healthy and that serve us. So, just to end off, right now I'm finding my rhythm, and I'm in a really great space, and I'm in a very privileged space with my partner, and I'm in a very safe space, and I don't have to worry about people discriminating against me. I don't have to worry about prejudice or about divide or entitlement or superiority, inferiority, misogynism, rape culture, lack of basic love. I get all these things, but it's painful for us to see these things happening in the world. And so we think, what can we do from this extremely privileged space that we are in? And like, we have to give something back. I mean, we just got so much, so what can we do to give back? And so Lutz and I, what we feel is that self-love really is part of the solution to a lot of the problems that we face. But the rest, we believe, lies in human values. And those are things that we are either born with or that we acquire as we grow older. But we found that a lot of people speak about human values, but they don't understand it deeply for themselves. And so we thought, we are privileged enough to not have to worry about activism, you know, the work that you're doing. And so let's take the time and our creativity and our energy that we get from one another and from our living space to actually create that space for people. And we decided, like, we need to reawaken human values on a global scale. But we have to start small because, you know, everyone here is starting a little movement. So we need to do the same in the best way we knew how. And we are creatives. We are musicians. We are editors. We are storytellers. We're not politicians. We're not bureaucrats. We cannot deal with those kind of things. We are not capable. And so we need to do what we can do best. And we looked at our personal development work and the courses that we did, and we found that, and even spaces like AIR, we find that when people leave these safe spaces where they're working on themselves, they kind of get stuck in their habits of their daily lives, and they forget, you know, the magic and the heart you know, the hard space that they encountered here, and they need to get into fight mode again. And so we thought we need to create something for that space. You know, when we leave these spaces, we need to create something for the daily life that people can practice when they're away from, you know, the other members of their groups, you know, when they're away from IPEP or from other personal development programs. You know, where's the space in your life where you find that personal development? So we did research and we asked people, what do you feel are important human values? And then which values do you feel are missing in the world? And so from that, we picked 12 human values. And we decided that each value should be given 1 week to focus on. And we fill it with challenges, with playfulness, with adventure, images, videos, meditations, music, and we create an experience in your life that will inspire you. And after 14 months of dealing with videos and music and sound and different people, we created what is called the activation game. And so today we would like to share a trailer with you and give you a little taste of what this activation game is about. So can we close the curtains? Please, someone at the back. There are strings in the middle of the curtains that can just